Hello, welcome back. Today I'm going to make some tear and share bread, and you can flavour it with olives and pesto or parmesan cheese or tomato, whatever you prefer, but it's a really nice thing to serve with some soup or with a casserole. So here we go. In my mixing bowl I've got 375 grams of strong white flour. Your bag needs to say strong and bread and all those words. It doesn't work with anything else. It won't work with gluten-free either. I'm really sorry. So 375 of strong white. If you wanted to do half white and half brown, you could do that. To that I'm going to add 1 sachet of this Easy Bake dried yeast. It's more readily available than fresh yeast. You have to go to the baker for that. So dried yeast from the supermarket goes in, and then with that we put 2 teaspoons of sugar, and that can be caster or granulated. And we just give that a stir. You always want to protect the yeast from what happens next, because it's actually quite delicate in a sense, and if you add anything too hot to it or add salt straight away, you can kill it. So the next stage is our liquids, and I'm going to melt 40 grams of butter or margarine with a total of 250 of a combination of water and milk. So the first thing is to melt that and then tip in your liquid. So I'm going to go over to the cooker next. I've got a small saucepan. I've got 40 grams of unsalted butter. It could be margarine, and you just need to get that to melt. You don't want it to start spitting, so keep an eye on it, and when it's melted we'll add the liquid. Now the butter has melted, and to that I'm going to add my liquids, and I've added milk to the water, and I've got a total of 250 mils. That goes in. Now you're aiming for something that is tepid, so you have to stick your finger in. And actually that's the right temperature, so we don't need to do anything else, but we now go and pour this into our flour, yeast and sugar. So we simply pour in the melted butter with the milk and the water. All goes in at once. At this stage we also add a teaspoon of salt. And the reason we put salt in is that it stops the yeast from working when it gets to 280 degrees in the oven. You don't want the yeast to carry on when you're eating the bread. So we just start to mix, and you'll probably find that this is enough. If it's not enough liquid, you can always add a little bit more milk. But stir it in as well as you can. Get it all combined. And I don't think I'm going to mix more by the spoon, so I'll clean the spoon off, and I'm going to start to knead this in a minute. So we need a space, and we might need a bit of flour on the worktop. As you start to squeeze and knead, you'll be able to sense where the damp patches of dough are, and they will soak up any of those bits in the bowl. So we're just gathering it together really now, and then we're going to do some serious kneading. And you need to knead it for 10 minutes, and you should feel tired at the end of it. Don't put the bowl in the sink, hang on to that. So on the work surface, coat it in flour, and then kneading. It's all about stretching the gluten and getting it to form long strands so that it becomes very doughy and very elastic. And it's a rhythmic motion. Pull it towards you, push it away. Pull it towards you, push it away. Pull it towards you, push it away. And you can build up a speed and a rhythm. And keep going until you've done 10 minutes. If you find it gets a bit sticky, a little bit more flour. You don't want too much, because a wet dough rises better than a dry dough, and it's always good to remember wetter is better. Right, there we are. That now has to have an hour to rise, or prove. So it goes back in the bowl, and then we have a piece of cling film, and you just rest that on the top of the dough and put it in a warm place. In the old days we used to put it in the airing cupboard. I'm going to put it on a chair in front of the radiator, because I'm doing this on a day that's quite chilly and the heat is on. So it's going to have an hour, and it should double in size. Right, this is a really nice warm spot here. It's one of my favourite places to sit. So the radiator is belting out the heat, and I've got that on the chair, and it should double in size within the hour, or in an hour let's say. Now our bread has had an hour, the bowl is lovely and warm and it's risen quite nicely, so we'll take off the cling film. Actually I'm going to put it on again later, so I'm going to hang on to that piece. It's ready cut. And we are going to knead this again. It's called knocking it back, just to get rid of some of the bigger bubbles and even out the spongy texture of the bread. But the other thing to do at this stage is to get the tin greased. So I've got a 1 kilo bread tin. It's non-stick, but I'm still going to grease it. I'm going to just pop a little bit of oil in there, and then with a piece of kitchen paper just rub that round, sides, base, ends, and that's ready. Okay, so we're going to take this out. We might need a little bit of flour, and it should come out beautifully. There we are, that's that. And we just give it a light knead, just to break up the big bubbles. So just bring it towards you and push it away with that rocking motion again. And we're ready to do the next thing, which is to cut it into 8 more or less equal pieces. So in half first, and then into quarters. It doesn't matter if they're not exact. And then each quarter again. You see, that's not as big as these. Dear. Down there and down here. And each one of these just needs a little bit of kneading before we decide what to add as our flavour. Now we need to add something to make this more interesting as a tear and share, and there are all sorts of combinations of flavours. You can drain some black olives, and I've cut pairs of olives each into quarters, so I've got 8 pieces. So here are 2 olives, and I'm simply going to go down the middle using my bridge and across. So you cut those into reasonable size pieces, and they can be worked into the dough. You could use sun-dried tomatoes, you could use parmesan cheese. Then we're going to spread the pieces of dough with something else, and I'm going to work in black olives and spread my dough with green pesto, but you could use red pesto. You could use sun-dried tomatoes in place of olives, work those in, and then use tomato puree or sun-dried tomato pesto. It's entirely up to you, but I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the 2 olives that I've cut up and pop those in the dough and get them hidden and just knead it a little bit. And with that one, it goes in without the pesto, but the second one needs some, so that goes in the corner of my tin. Second one, little bit of kneading, another couple of olives, work those in. If they jump out, just pop them back, get those in there. And then this one gets spread with pesto on the outside. A reasonable blob on the side, and then it sits next to the first one, like that. Then you do your third, and you keep going until you've done all of the 8. So again, work those in, get your pesto. So the first one doesn't have any pesto and the subsequent ones do. And it goes in, touching the one in front, so that you're going to get pesto in all those joins and olives in the middle of each one. That's our last one going in. So you can see that what's happened is we've got pesto in between each of them. The first one went with none, the second one has gone into that, the pesto is on the side where it touches that one. Now this goes back to rise for another 20 minutes, so I'm going to put my cling film back on, and put it in a warm place, and that can be my chair in front of my radiator, or I could put the oven on at this point and sit it over the vent of the oven. Now, our tear and share loaf has had 20 minutes resting on the vent at the back of the cooker, and you can see that it's risen quite nicely. I don't want to shock it so that it all collapses. If I take the cling film off, you can see that where there were gaps between the little eighths, the segments, it's all closed up. It's risen nicely, and that needs to go in the oven now. Gas mark 5, 190 electric, 170 fan, and it takes 45 minutes. It's quite a long time, but there's a lot there to get cooked. So I'm going to put that in now and set the timer. Now our loaf has had 45 minutes, and just look at that beauty. All the gaps have closed, golden brown, and I need to be sure it's cooked. So the way to do that is to tap the bottom of it, and it's a bit tricky with this because I don't really want to get pesto on the oven mitts. So what I've done is to cut a piece of greaseproof paper that I'm going to rest on the top of it. I'm going to try and turn it over. Here we go. And then lift this off without making too much noise, and tap. Now if you listen to this, it's what's called a dull thud, and that tells you that it's cooked. So it needs to go onto a board, and the best way is to put your board on it and then turn it over, and then you're ready to serve it. How lovely is that? So here's our tear and share loaf. You can either use a knife and cut slices, or you can simply tear it apart, and it's not difficult. It will simply fall apart and reveal the pesto, and then when you eat it you rip it, and you'll find the olives or whatever you chose to put in there. So it's great with soup, and I've got some tomato soup that I made earlier, or you can have it with a casserole. Either way, have a go, like, share, subscribe, send us a photo, and I hope you enjoy it. Bye for now.